On this channel, we have covered a lot of splatterpunk, and you guys seem to really like those, and I do too, honestly. Among those, some of the best of them were written by David Sodegren. We have covered by him The Haar and Maggie's Grave, which are both wonderful books, but before these two, he wrote a couple of other books, one of which is today's video. That video is going to be our next entry in the X-treme book club, and that book is Night Shoot by David Sodegren, which was written in 2019 before the other two we've covered. And although I feel it isn't as good as the other two, Sodegren was still learning his style, and you can see the beginnings of something great here. Sodegren is great at taking a very classical feeling horror premise and turning it into a great splatterpunk story with some intense imagery. Before we get into that book though, for all of the new viewers, let me explain how a video works on this channel. We start out with an intro, where we discuss the creator of the work and the genre itself. Then we get into the summary, which is usually the longest part of the video. And then we talk about the themes during the analysis. This video, the analysis might be a little short though, as I do feel like the story, more than any other, is pretty much just an interesting story. However, there are themes in any story that we can try to find, so we will still try to do it a little bit. So without getting into this intro any longer, let's get into David Sodegren's Night Shoot. October 1976. He got out of his car. He was late. He was never going to make it in time, he thought. He ran through the woods, tripping over roots as he ran. He saw the light in the distance, the giant manor. He wasn't going to make it. God in heaven forgive him. He took out his rusted keys and opened the giant main door. He turned on the light in the kitchen and he saw it. He then cried. He slid down the wall in horror. He was too late, and he was sorry. 43 years later, Elspeth was awoken by Kermit the Frog singing as an alarm clock. She shushes him as her girlfriend, Sandy, nudges her to go turn it off. Elspeth gets up and thinks it's a dumb alarm. It's too relaxing. She should have used Coldplay as an alarm, but the thought of waking up to Coldplay is worse than death. Sandy was already up though, and continuing to nudge her girlfriend to get ready. It was 5 a.m. Why was Kermit singing this early, she wondered. Sandy reminds her that today was the first day of her shoot for her final student film. She had to go pick up Deke, another member of their group, and head to the shoot location very early. She only has an hour to get ready though. She gets in the shower, and after she finishes, she gets out and sees Sandy reading over the script in bed. She reads out loud, The Haunting of Lacey Carmichael by Robert Crawford? Oh geez, Robert didn't even spell his last name right. It was Robert Crawford. She continues to read. Lacey strips and we see her breasts. There is a spooky noise and Lacey goes out to look at the window, her breasts pressed against the glass. Lacey is naked and admires herself in the mirror. She plays with her breasts. Then Rex comes in. He is not naked, but they have sex. It is very sexy. What is this script? Sandy says as she laughs. She says Elspeth can't show this as her final dissertation in university. Elspeth tries to get the script back. She says she didn't write it, she's just the costume designer. And this was her final dissertation as a fourth-year film student. Coincidentally, by the way, I am also a fourth-year film student, but I'm an editor, so I don't have to deal with this kind of shit. Sandy says it's about time she left now, right? Besides, she has to go keep Robert in line, that sleazebag. She says she can, unless Sandy wants her to stay and do some stuff. Sandy says she'll be here when she gets back. Get going. Elspeth then leads the flat, not realizing that things would never be the same again. A couple of hours later, she was almost at her destination, Crawford Manor. Deke was in the passenger seat, sleeping. He had almost slept the entire 90-minute trip from Aberdeen. Not bad for a grown adult. He had recently shaved his head, so he'd stopped getting ID'd at liquor stores, and he sleepily asks, "Are we there yet?" Elspeth was annoyed by his snoring, so him waking up and asking was a welcome sight, but she didn't even know if they were close. All they could see was pine trees and the rain coming down. But it should only be about another mile, she says. Deke says it should be like a huge mansion like Downtown Abbey. They go through the trees and they finally see it. It's huge, a massive Gothic mansion. All the trees around it look like they're praying to it. She can hardly imagine something like this exists on the Scottish mainland. It was in the middle of nowhere, and it would be standing long after all of them were dead. Now that's a lovely thought, she thought to herself. She looked at the manor. several floors high, old as can be, wood planks jutting out from the roof, a real rich person getaway. Elspeth had always grown up poor, so the fact that one of her friends' relatives had allowed them to shoot in their giant mansion was something different. They got out of their car and walked past the little white van with all the camera equipment. One of the other crew members, Aiden, was there. He sleepily pulled his beanie lower over his face and said, "Good morning." Elspeth looked closer to the mansion. Robert actually had outdone himself for once. He was a shitty director, writer, and friend, but damn was he a good location scout. The mansion was backed up to the ocean on a cliff. Elspeth looked over the ledge despite her slight fear of heights. It was probably 100 feet down, waves crashing against the rocky alcove. That's way too high, she thought to herself. She headed inside and she saw Aiden and Deke carrying tons of camera equipment inside. As she walked through the main entrance, she saw Laura, Robert's girlfriend and also the script supervisor, looking over the script. The sun came through the windows, and for the first time, she realized the windows were barred. Makes sense, she thought. Bunch of expensive stuff here just ripe to be stolen otherwise. Can't let anyone in the house. Or out. That's the spirit. They were filming a horror film after all. Let's get in the mood. Robert looked at his crew, annoyed. Laura looks at him and asks, "What's up?" He says his crew has 2 speeds, slow and stop. They need to get moving. They have 1 day to film here. His uncle Ross is allowing them to shoot here for 1 day. He asks Laura if they could make it work in 1 day feasibly, since she's the script supervisor. Laura says, yeah, but it's gonna be really tight. If they only had even 1 more hour. Robert says no way that's gonna happen. His uncle Ross is a weirdo, a real black sheep of the family. The only reason they were allowed to film here was because Ross owed Robert's father a huge favor. Laura asks what it was for. Did he have nude photos of him or something? Robert says no, his father helped him with something a long time ago. He doesn't even know what it was, but he owes him a huge favor, he says. It got them 1 singular day in the mansion only for this shoot. They have to be out by 8 o'clock at night because that's when Ross leaves too. Laura asks what he's talking about. His uncle leaves? What does that mean? Robert ignores her and looks at Elspeth, who is carrying things in too. Their actors were here 20 minutes ago and the crew just showed up. Hurry up, he thinks to himself. Laura asks again, what does Robert mean that Ross leaves at 8 as well? He says, oh, his uncle doesn't live here. He has a place in town. He just comes here for the day and sleeps in town somewhere else. He doesn't know why. Maybe bad memories or something, Laura says, but Robert isn't paying attention. He just rubs his hand on his scruffy beard. It was his ritual. He wouldn't shave until after the picture was over filming, for good luck. He tells Laura to go get the actors ready while he goes to talk to Ross about trying to get another hour. He goes up to the door and taps on it lightly with his knuckles. His mouth was dry. Why was he so scared of Ross? It was his uncle, for crying out loud. Ross cracked the door open slightly and looked at Robert. He asked Robert what's he want. He already told him he has access to the entire 2nd floor, and any rooms that are there that are unlocked are free game. Film anywhere. Just don't disturb anything else and put everything back where he found it. Robert swallows, agrees, and says, can he just have it for 1 more day? Is that possible? They're in a time crunch. Ross says as much as he loves talking to his nephew and telling him no, isn't he wasting his own precious time right now? He suggests he goes and makes the most of it. He says the only reason that Robert is even here right now is because his father is under the impression that Ross owes him. In a way, he's right. What a good memory his father has. Robert hated being talked down to. He had to pull out his trump card here to get another day. Robert says, please, let them have 1 more day. He can pay him. Ross scoffs. Ross tells Robert, look around. Does it look like he needs any more money? Does he not have enough suits of armor or Persian rugs? The house is plenty big for 1 family. Robert's eyes narrow. Family? Doesn't Ross live here alone? Ross says he didn't say family. He said it was plenty big for 1 man. All his equipment is to be out by 8, not a second later. He asks if he makes himself clear. Robert swallows and says, yes. Good, Ross says as he slams the door. Fuck you too, Robert says under his breath. One day, this will all be mine and you'll be in the fucking grave. Elspeth sat with the rest of the crew waiting for Robert to come join them at the meeting he himself called. She looks at Laura, a beautiful woman in a black and white striped dress and heels. How did she end up with Robert? Robert was skinny, wore a leather jacket and a hat. He looked like a film nerd, and somehow he ended up with Laura. But they were meant for each other. Laura was the script supervisor, producer, and first AD. Arguably the three most hated roles on the film set, which fits her personality. Robert walks into the meeting finally, and Elspeth looks around at everyone. Amongst the crew, there were two new faces, the actors, Hannah and Ted. They looked really young. Too young to be playing a couple that's getting divorced. But Elspeth figured this was all Robert could get due to his frequent nudity scenes. The editor, Gordon, was noticeably absent though, which sucked because Gordon was her only real friend in the group. Gordon was the editor, and he frequently butt heads with Robert, so he was asked to stay home and just do the edit. Elspeth wanted to not be in this group for her final, but no other group had been available, so she had to stick it out with her Z-movie horror group. The last film they made was called Robert Burns, a film about England's most famous poet who was raised from the dead as a zombie and went across London killing hookers. At the end, the main actor looks in the camera and says, "Tonight, Robert Burns in hell." It was ridiculous. When they showed the movie to the class, Robert had to leave after everyone laughed at that part because he was so angry. Robert spoke up finally to the crew of his movie. "This shoot," he says, "we have 1 day to shoot this. 1 day. No fuck-ups. These are our actors, Ted and Hannah, but please refer to them by their on-screen names from now on." He goes over an over-the-top theme and message of his movie about disintegrating bonds or whatever, and Elspeth and Deke laughed to themselves. After the speech was over, Robert clapped and said, "Let's make some art." Elspeth hated that. He said that before every day of shoot. It made sense if you had a very loose understanding of the word art, but whatever. The sooner they did this, the sooner they could go home. So in her head, Elspeth said, "Let's make some art." As far as student film shoots went, it was going well. Not that it mattered too much, but her grade would be on the costumes and the production design. The movie didn't have to be good, just her part in it had to be. In the other room, Elspeth heard two people arguing about how a slap has to be real and look good on camera or something. After this, they had to get ready for the final scene to film, the shower scene. It was weird because in other productions that Robert had put on, the nude scenes were always filmed first. That way, if the actors refused, they could always find another one and didn't have to reshoot anything. While Elspeth was waiting for the next scene, she realized they were taking a long time in there. She walked down to the set and looked in the room where everyone was. It was full purple, annoyingly purple. She expected Prince to be strumming a guitar in the corner or something. Elspeth walked up to Laura and asked her where Robert went, but Laura just ignores her. Deke said that he went to go get something from the van, a prop or something. "What is it?" Elspeth asked Laura, and she snaps, "I don't know, Elspeth, what do you think it is?" That's not really an answer, she thought. Deke continued talking to her, and he kept going on about the death of physical media and stuff like that. As Elspeth begins to tune out Deke, Robert walks in the room with a shotgun. Elspeth imagined Robert killing all of them with it, but Laura immediately jumped on his ass, saying, "This was seriously irresponsible." Robert says, "Relax, it's not even loaded." Laura says she doesn't care, there is zero need for it. Laura argued back and forth with Robert as the crew just watched. The only thing missing was the popcorn as they went at it. Laura said this wasn't even on the risk assessment or anything like that. No shotgun. Hannah says she doesn't want to shoot a gun either. Robert, noticing the weakest person here was Hannah, jumped over to her in the argument so he could be loud over her. He said she wouldn't be shooting it, just chasing Ted with it. Elspeth said she could have gotten us a fake gun. That was her job as the set designer. Robert, with his ego hurt, just says, "Forget it." He was trying to make her job easier for her, but fine if she wants to be like that. He pouts and takes the gun back to the van. As they wait, Elspeth talks to Hannah, asks if she's nervous for this next scene. She says no, not really. She's confident about her body. She doesn't mind doing nude scenes. Elspeth asks if she wants her in there too. Hannah says, "No way, you perv," smiling at Elspeth. But then she says, "Thank you, Elizabeth, for looking out for me." Elspeth looks around. She says, "It's Elspeth, not Elizabeth." Hannah says, "Yeah, that's what she said." The crew watched with bated breath as the scene played out before them, Robert stroking his beard as the scene started. Rex, is that you? Hannah called out to the camera. Her acting was awful. Deadpan. But that wasn't what mattered here. She took off her blouse and it floated to the ground like a leaf in autumn. Good. That looks good, Robert thinks as he licks his lips. He looks down at the monitor of the camera. The lighting looks good, but she was off-center. God damn it, Aiden. Too distracted by her tits to frame her properly. Hannah shrugs. Must have been my my imagination, she says. Robert just motions for her to just keep going. They didn't have time to be redoing things. It was 6:30 already. She unclasped her bra and tried to pull her pants down, but they were stuck. She tried and tried. She looked at the camera and says, "Can we do another take?" Robert says, "No time. Gotta keep rolling." Robert says, "Make it faster and sexier." He could feel Laura glaring at him after he said that. But it's not like they're making Casablanca here. They're doing a student horror film. Boobs and ass are a staple. Hannah begins to strip down off her underwear and stops. She asks, "Is this really necessary?" "Cut," Robert says. She said she was okay with her boobs being shown, not her everything else, she says. Robert says she signed up for this. This scene is necessary. It's about deconstructing boundaries and the ubiquitousness of... Yeah, I'm not reading this whole paragraph. Robert just goes on for like half a page about complete bullshit. Hannah regarded him blankly. Good, his bullshitting worked, he thinks. Robert says, "Okay, good. Really make sure to scrub your breasts here, as Rex really likes those and you're getting his stares off you symbolically." Hannah asks, "Will the water in the shower be hot?" Robert says, "No, it's gonna fog up the lens." And action! Hannah takes off her bra and throws it to the ground. Good, good, Robert thinks. God, he wanted her. He was a piece of shit, but not a cheater. Hannah turns on the water. It's freezing. She winces and slips, falls down and takes the curtain with her. It almost knocks over some camera equipment, and Robert has to lunge for it and grab it just to stop it from falling down. "Jesus, you're an actor! Act like it's hot!" he says. Elspeth goes over to comfort Hannah and puts a towel around her on the ground. Robert says he doesn't care if it's unrealistic. He deals in dreams and nightmares. And they all look behind them to see Robert's uncle standing there and them watching them all. He is unflinching, uncaring of what is happening. He says, 7:30. Get your equipment and go. Anything left here will be mine. He then slams the door. Elspeth takes Hannah to the actor's room. Ted gets up and says, "Hey, this is his room too." Elspeth snaps at him, "Get out or she'll throw him out." He says, "Whatever," and he just leaves. Elspeth asks the poor actress, "Is she okay?" She just says her back really hurts. Elspeth asks to look at her back, see how it looks. She lets Hannah turn around and drops the towel. There was a huge yellow and black bruise. There goes the continuity of the film, she thinks. Hannah asks if she thinks Robert will fire her for this. Elspeth says, "No, it's okay. There's no way he would. No one else would act for this shit film, let alone get naked for it." Elspeth comforts her, and Hannah says, "Thanks, Elizabeth." Elspeth says, "Again, it's Elspeth, not Elizabeth." She says, "Oh yeah, that's a funny name." Elspeth wished Gordon was here. He had all the talent and none of the ego of the rest of the group. She sat in the editing bay as Gordon cut around all of the shitty directing decisions Robert made during their first year movie, The Grave That Yawned. More like the audience that yawned, she thought after it was over. Elspeth continues to comfort Hannah. She says, "Don't let Robert take advantage of you." Hannah says that he said he liked her demo reel. Elspeth says, "Yeah, I bet he did." Poor Hannah. No talent and no willpower to get nude. But she was beautiful. Maybe that would be enough. Elspeth says for her to say something if she feels like Robert's taking advantage of her. Or at the very least, come to Elspeth and she'll tell him off. Hannah asks why she'd do that for her. Elspeth says they have to stand together. Hannah says, "Together?" But Elspeth isn't an actor. Elspeth says, "No, we women have to stand against Robert in particular." Hannah shakes her head and says, "Thank you, Elizabeth, but I'm fine, really. He said there'd be no close-ups. It would be very art house. That's what he said. That's why he said make some art at the beginning of the shoot, right?" Elspeth thinks to herself, if Hannah believes that, she's dumber than she looks. It took about 15 seconds for Hannah to see that Elspeth was right after that. They walked back into the room and saw Aiden and Robert looking at the footage. Hannah looked at it as they tried to close it and said, "That's my vagina," she screamed at a close-up of her privates. Hannah says for them to play the whole thing, right now. Robert meekly says they can refilm it. Hannah says, "No, watch it back right now." And so they did, and they saw her fanny in 4K 23.976 frames per second. Hannah looks at Robert, and Hannah says, "I quit. Elizabeth was right. You're taking advantage of me." She storms off, and they all watch her as she goes, and then they all look at Elspeth. And she says, "Wow, this Elizabeth person sounds like a real bitch, huh?" Robert clenches his teeth, balls his fist. This was the angriest Elspeth had ever seen him. He didn't scream, he simply said through angered breath, "I don't know what you fucking said or what you fucking did, but you're gonna go talk to her and fix this." Elspeth says, "No way, she didn't make them zoom into her private parts, it's not her problem." Aiden says, "She's right. It's now all of their problem, and she's gonna go fix it." Elspeth looked at Laura. Maybe a girl would understand. Laura says, "Go get our main actor back." Not even Deke said anything. He just sat there looking at his hands. "Fine, I'll go," Elspeth says, storming off. She stormed off to the actor's room yet again, and as she does, she feels a hand on her shoulder. She jumped and Deke was behind her. He said, "Sorry, he didn't mean to startle her." He says that, well, she knows how Robert can be, right? Elspeth says, "Oh, she knows how he can be, but it would have been nice if he stood up for her." Deke apologizes and asks if Elspeth wants help to talk to Hannah. She says, yeah, that's what Hannah really wants to see right now, his big dumb fucking face. Deke sinks a bit and Elspeth apologizes. She says, "Sorry, just go try to calm Robert down, I'll handle this." She goes into the room and Hannah is crying. She says, "Is Elspeth here to talk her out of leaving? Or worse, to say that she told her so?" Elspeth says, "No. She wants to tell Hannah that she did the right thing." Hannah says, "Well, she wouldn't mind staying, she's just mad. Just as long as Robert deletes the footage, she'll stay and finish the movie out." Elspeth says, "Oh, she knows that she'll stay, but she's here to tell her to not come back. Fuck Robert, fuck this movie. She's better than this." Hannah cries a little bit and then hugs Elspeth. She says, "Thank you." She's gonna leave now, though. Elspeth asks, how is she gonna get home? If she waits 15 minutes, Elspeth will take her home in her car. Hannah says no, she'll just call an Uber. She cannot stand to see Robert again. Ever again. Not after that. Hannah then hugs Elspeth again and walks out the door. She says, "Thank you," as she leaves. And Elspeth says, "Don't let anyone take advantage of you ever again." Hannah says she won't, and then closes the door. Elspeth then looks in the mirror. What the fuck did she just get herself into? Hannah walked through the corridors, her anger turning to more of a disgust. How could he do that to her? He said the nudity wouldn't be too gratuitous. She didn't know what that word meant, but this was too much. She walked to the front door and tried to open it. Locked. Shit. She had to go talk to Ross Crawford. She wasn't going to talk to Robert. She refused. She didn't like the look of Ross. He was too tall, too old, but it was better than talking to Robert. She went to go find him as she walked past the big portraits of old men and a stuffed bear she found near a door. No Crawford. She checked another door. No Crawford. She felt on the verge of tears. She just wanted to go home. She heard a door unlocking behind her. Strange, but maybe Crawford was leaving. So she cracked it open and went inside. A crib was in the center of the room, and the walls were lined with dolls. All sorts of dolls. Ceramic dolls, dolls with cracked faces, sailor dolls, clown dolls, too many clown dolls at that. How creepy. She went up to the crib and put her hand on it. It's a baby. It's gonna be a dead baby, she thought to herself. But it was just another doll in it. She heard the door open in the hallway, and that took Hannah out of her imagination. She ran out of the doll room and into the other room, but she smelled what was inside the room before she saw it. And when she walked in, she begged, pleaded. She wouldn't tell anyone. She swore, please. And then it all went dark for her. So we're fucked, Laura said to the entire crew. She was the first AD and timekeeper. Deke suggests maybe they could salvage it in the edit. Robert says no way. They still have half the film to shoot. Can't we just use Ted and be done? Deke says. Robert says that they have more than a couple more scenes together. It will never work. Robert says okay, he's gonna go talk to his uncle. He's gonna get them another day tomorrow. Leave all the equipment where it is. They disperse and Robert goes down the stairs slowly. He opens the door and says, hey. But before he could say anything else, Ross says, no, I assume you have all your equipment and you are now leaving. Robert says, yes, of course. Thank you again for today, Uncle Ross. Ross says he never wants to hear from Robert or his dad again and closes the door. Robert walks away and thinks. After Robert leaves, Ross thinks to himself that he'd like to be called Crawford. He's only Ross to his friends, and he has none of those anymore. He waits in the room and hears the thuds of the girl that he caught a second ago in the other room. She was lasting a long time. Sometimes they did. About 10 minutes later, the noises stopped. He went in the room where he threw Hannah's body. Her leg was almost deboned in there. Clumps of flesh lie on the ground. Her left breast was missing. A souvenir, I guess, Ross thinks. He kicked her. Shit, she was still alive. Damn it. This was a mess. He bent down and slowly put his large hands over her throat and squeezed. He crushed her windpipe, and it was over. What a damn mess. Elspeth walked outside and saw all the other crew getting in Robert's van. He told them as they left that there was a McDonald's just down the road. Go there. No ands, ifs, or buts. Elspeth took some time getting into her car, the rain pouring all over her. Her Fiat was a piece of junk, and as she got in, she looked at her phone. No service. Go figure. She looked back at the manor. It was even more imposing at nighttime. Ross Crawford pulled up next to her in his Land Rover and signaled for her to put down her window and talk to him. Over the loud rain, he asked, "Is something wrong?" She just said, "No, she's just looking at her phone." Ross says, "There's no service out here, just the way he likes it." Then he closes his window and drives away. Elspeth looked again at the manor. There was a light on in the attic. That wasn't there before. And then all of a sudden, it just turned off. Had she just imagined that? Whatever. All their equipment was in the house as well. Did Robert get them another day with Ross? Well, I guess the only thing to do now was go to the McDonald's. She got there and Robert welcomed her through bites of a cheeseburger. He says he needs to talk to her, but what took her so long to get here? Elspeth said that she talked to his uncle. Robert's expression soured. "What'd you talk about?" he asked as he swallowed. "Did you tell him we left our equipment?" Elspeth says no, of course not. She just thought she saw a light on in the attic. Robert just ignores her. He blurts out, "What do you think about our night shoot?" Elspeth said, surely he cannot expect them to work 24 hours straight, right? Robert says no, but he expects everyone here to feel the same way he does about this. Laura interjects herself unneededly, saying, "Oh, she knows she does." Elspeth thought about dropping out of the movie right then and there. She could make up an excuse and drop out and do her final on a dissertation next year. Forget all these people. Forget this class. But as she had to admit, a piece of her was intrigued. Robert says he borrowed a spare key. Elspeth said that that's great and all, but what about Ross? Robert says, well, he leaves about 8 o'clock, goes to sleep somewhere else in town, and then returns at 8 in the morning. He wonders why. Okay, Elspeth says, what about our main actress? We have no lead. It went silent. She then felt the eyes of lions all over her. Robert says, you acted before, right? Elspeth says, no, she's not going to do this. Besides, the only acting she's done was a horse in a play. The third horse, at that. Elspeth looked over at Laura and asks, why doesn't she do it? Laura says because she wasn't the one who got the main actress to quit on us. There it was. There's the reason. They all blamed her. Robert says that they wouldn't need to do a night shoot at all if she didn't do her all feminist bullshit. This was ridiculous, she thought. She wasn't going to do this. She wouldn't stoop this low. Aiden says, you have to do it. They were all ganging up on her. She looked to Deke and he looks away shyly. He says he thinks if she doesn't do this, all of them are going to fail. She has to. He can't fail or his parents are going to kill him. She refuses. She's not going to do this. But a part of her feels bad. Felt awful from all the peer pressure. Was it her fault? Was she being too prideful? It was 4 against 1. Was she being that arrogant? Surely all 4 of them can't be wrong. She stammers. Elspeth says, it's too dark. That was a weak excuse, she thinks to herself. Robert says, well, then they'll film all the important scenes tonight and then cheat the other scenes at his big house later. At least this will match the exterior shots they got. Elspeth stops. Fine, she says. She won't do any nudity, though. Robert says, okay, they can discuss that. Elspeth says, no, this will not be talked about later. No nudity, that's the only way she's going to do it. Robert says, but it's important for the film. Elspeth thinks in her head, what's wrong with the nudity, though? She has a nice body, it's like wearing a bikini, right? Elspeth says, fine, but only in underwear. No nudity. Robert relents. Fine. They finish their food, and Robert says, let's go make some art. Robert and Laura drove back down towards the manor and passed a hitchhiker. It sucks, but they had no time. Robert laughed to Laura. He says, it's gonna be tight, but he thinks they can refilm everything and probably film the final act somewhere else. They can do it. He supposes he can scrap the shower scene, right? Laura pipes up and says, oh, all of a sudden you don't want the nudity in your film? Angrily. Robert says, well, of course he does, but Elspeth is their friend, and he doesn't want to exploit her. Laura says that friends don't cost other friends their entire career at university. Robert says, he doesn't know. She is their friend. Laura says, oh, grow a pair of balls, Robert. If your film needs nudity, then it needs it. Just do it and get the nudity. And Laura gets to put that snooty bitch in her place at the same time. Laura says that she can get her to do it. She's never met anyone she can't manipulate. Robert says, well, except for him, right? Laura says, of course, babe. Except for you. As she puts her hand on his thigh and works her way up. Robert feels like he's still a kid, making movies that only his parents would sit through. He has doubts. He wonders if bigger directors ever had doubts. Probably not. Laura says she probably has to cut the sex scene next week. She doubts that Elspeth could act out having sex correctly. She's a lesbian, right? She couldn't do it right. Robert says maybe Laura could swap in for Ted for that scene. Laura says, Robert, you're disgusting. He says, well, sex sells, Laura. Especially steamy lesbian sex, right? She calls him gross, and they continue in silence. Robert thinks, thank God that Laura can't manipulate him. Right. Elspeth arrived after she sent a message to Sandy saying she would be filming overnight and not to expect her home till morning. She was coerced into taking off her clothes, but she thinks she has to do it. She says she'll see her in the morning. She arrived and most of them were already on the porch trying to get the door open, and she saw Deke looking over the cliff with a boom mic. Maybe he'll jump, she thinks as a joke. Maybe she'll jump right after him. She walks up to him and he says, oh, he's just getting room tone, or perhaps ambiance. They walk together back to the porch and Elspeth says, stop filming her ass, by the way, Aiden. Aiden says, oh, you love it, and they get to the porch. They get inside and Robert says, all right, let's film this. Let's make some art. He asks Laura, what scene do we start with? And she says, well, I guess the stalking sequence. Elspeth sighs a sigh of relief. At least the semi-nude scene won't be until later. Elspeth says she's gonna go change. Aiden says, oh, he'll go with her. Safety in numbers, right? Elspeth would normally argue, but it is really dark in there. So, whatever. She was okay with it. They go down the dark corridor, and she says she's gonna change in the actor's room. And Aiden says, oh, he'll go in the room next door. That's weird, but okay, whatever. Everyone else waited in the entrance. Ted asks why he even needs to be there. All his scenes were already filmed. Robert asks, well, do you have a car to leave? Says, no. And Robert says, well, I guess you have to stay for the whole film that night, huh? I would have just slept in the McDonald's at this point. Robert turns to Deke. He says he needs to get room tones and Foley. Go do it. Deke says, yep. Great. They stand there awkwardly. Robert says, so go do it. Deke asks, now? In the dark? Robert says, turn the lights on then, idiot. Go. He turns and locks the front door when he and Laura are alone. Laura asks, what are you doing? He says he already had one actress bail. He's not letting Elspeth just walk out of the manor alone. She won't like that, but whatever. Laura turns to him and says she doesn't like that he's locking them in. It's a fire hazard, and it's not on the risk assessment sheet. Robert says, oh, fuck the risk assessment. He gives her the key then. He says, there. Now she decides who leaves and who stays. Laura says whatever and puts the key in her bra because she didn't have pockets in her dress. She doesn't like this. Robert just sneers at her in the dark. The next chapter is pretty graphic and slightly unnecessary, but I'll go over it quickly. It's about a girl named Claire. She was a runaway. She had been texting in class and her teacher had taken her phone. Obviously, the teacher didn't like that she was texting in class about her weight. So when she got home, her drunk and abusive father got a call from the school. Her father had always been abusive since her mother had died, and her father had already heard about the texting incident. He pulls down her pants and whips her butt. But that's not all. It doesn't describe it, but it sort of implies that he sexually abuses his daughter as well after this, only 16 years old. This girl then had enough. She ran away after this incident. 2 cars had passed her in the rainy Scotland night in the past 2 hours, and neither had stopped. One even hydroplaned and splashed her with water. What an asshole. Finally, someone slowed down. It was Ross Crawford. Oh, but no, he's not slowing down. He's speeding up. She tries to jump out of the way, but it's too late. The car smashes into her leg as she tries to dive out of the way, and she lands face down in the grass near the road. Someone got out of the car. Help! She cries out. Maybe it was an accident. It was rainy and dark. It could have been one. She saw a light flash across a butcher knife in the man's hand. There has to be a better life than this, she thinks, as the knife plunges into her, and then it all goes black for her. Elspeth got undressed in the actor's room to the Beach Boys. I hate the Beach Boys, by the way. As she focused on the voice in the song, her phone died. Great. If Fanna was here, she wouldn't be in this position. Elspeth thinks to herself, well, you dug yourself in this hole. Now you have to dig your way out. She then heard a noise from the wall. It startled her. Aiden? She called out. No, it couldn't be Aiden. It was on the other wall, away from the room he was in. She looked at the window, and it couldn't have come from there. There was a sheer 100 feet drop down into the rocky waters. Where did the noise come from? Suddenly, she felt very exposed and in the nude. That was close, Aiden thought to himself. He had been the luckiest man on Earth that morning when he found a way into the walls. It surprised him, but the manor was clearly built with a voyeur in mind. Ross Crawford, you dog, he thought. A kindred spirit, Aiden thought. There were holes in every single room in the walls. He had creeped all the way around the room to the other side. Effectively, a system of corridors in the walls to spy on every room. He didn't want to be too obvious, so he went to the other side of the room. 10 feet away from him was Elspeth Murray. She was beautiful, but she doesn't date guys, he thinks. At least she hadn't in the past 4 years. But there she was, undressing 10 feet in front of him. Elspeth looked nervous now. She quickly got dressed and put on her jeans and ran out the room. Sandy Beaumont got home pretty late from the gym that night. She looked for Elspeth all around the house, but she wasn't home. But she expected something like that to happen. She says it was going to be a late night, but she really should be home soon. So Sandy takes a shower and puts her hair back in her towel. She looks at the little velvet box she kept with her. Inside, a platinum ring with a diamond. Maybe tonight will be the night. She could pop the question. Then again, maybe not. It had to be perfect, so Elspeth would say yes. But she probably would anyway. Probably. Around 10, she looked at her phone for any text from Elspeth. A missed call and a text about how she had to strip for the film during a night shoot? Shit, Sandy thought. She didn't like this. She didn't like any of the people in that group. She had to go pick Elspeth up. She wouldn't allow her to do this. That body was for her only. But she didn't know where that mansion was. Then she had an idea. She got on the internet and found his number. Back at the manor, Elspeth picked up the old phone that reminded her of her childhood and said, "Who is this? You're watching me? You better stop. My boyfriend's almost home." "What do you mean you know I don't have a boyfriend?" "Because you've been watching me for 2 years." "But my boyfriend died 2 years ago to the day. Unless you're haunting me from beyond the grave." This script is stupid, she thought. And cut. That was great, Elspeth. Elspeth asked if Robert is sure he doesn't want to do another take. He says there's no time. It's already past midnight. Laura says the next shots are going to be following Elspeth around the house. Aiden says, well, to do that, they need a dolly track. He can't shoot handheld for this. It'll make people motion sick. Robert says, no time. Forget the track. The motion sickness might add to the film, actually. Also, shoot MOS. Robert says, Deke, go upstairs. He isn't needed. No sound. Deke says, what do you mean? Robert says, that's what MOS means, idiot. Deke sulked, and Elspeth felt a bit bad for him. But he didn't stand up for him at either McDonald's or earlier. She had no friends here. Fuck him. Deke walked up the stairs and thought about how this wasn't his fault, so why is Elspeth mad at him? He didn't even take sides. He said nothing to her at McDonald's. And he hated confrontation anyway. He was reminded about the last time on the last film when Robert yelled at him so hard that he cried and Elspeth comforted him. Maybe he should have stood up for her. Like how she comforted him then. He still could, but no, it's already in progress. He put on his headphones and looked around the room and started to record some room tone. He walked around and saw some paintings lining the walls. A bunch of old dudes, he thought. But there was one of a young man that looked kind of like Ross Crawford, but like 50 years younger. He was still as ugly, but a lot younger. Next to him, though, was a beautiful woman with auburn hair. His former wife, maybe? They had a little baby in their hands swaddled in cloth, but you couldn't really see the child. Under the painting, a plaque read, Harriet's Arrival. Huh. There was hope for Deke yet, he thought. If a guy like that could get a beautiful woman like that, he might have a chance. Whatever, though. He continued. He looked around and thought, how many rooms could one old man need? Most of this beautiful house sat untouched, unloved. Like my penis, he thought, and laughed. Just then he heard footsteps behind him. He looked around and saw nothing. He aimed his boom mic up and realized that the sound was coming from above. But there wasn't a floor above this floor, unless there was like an attic or something, he thought. Just then more noise, and Deke turned a corner and Elspeth screamed right into his microphone, and with his headphones all the way up, routed through the boom mic, it nearly made him go deaf. It was so loud that he peed himself a little and fell down to the ground. Elspeth said, sorry. Deke got up and tried to look cool. He said, it's fine, just startled him a bit. She said, sorry again, but Robert was looking for him. They're doing some sound stuff now. He said, okay, he'll be right there, trying to hide the wet stain in his jeans. Ted paced back and forth, like he was waiting for something to do. Why did he have to be here at all? All his scenes were filmed but one. He goes over to Laura and asks, is he done? She says, no. He has to refilm the argument because it was filmed in a way that it can't be edited around, unless he wants to look like a bunch of pixels with a digital zoom. He looks at himself in the mirror. He was in good shape. He had to be. He thought about Elspeth, though. She was good looking. Better than Hannah, actually. But man, he's tired. He has nothing to do but wait until dawn when they're finished. Fuck it. He's gonna go take a little nap. He can't do his best work unless he got a full 9 hours of sleep, so he's gonna go take a little siesta. He went back to the actor's room and lied down on the bed, and he fell asleep almost immediately. He was really tired. Soon, though, he felt some heat near him in the bed. Something breathed close to him, and it wasn't entirely unpleasant. Hannah? He asked. Soon, lips and a tooth dragged across his neck. He liked Hannah. She was pretty, but he had a girlfriend. Knock it off, he said, wanting 10 more minutes before his scene. Soon, it was on top of him and kissing the nape of his neck hard. What the fuck, he thinks? Its hand caresses him, but it's gruff, huge, and rough. This isn't Hannah, he thought. He tries to pull away as fast as he could and opened his eyes to see something resembling a face. Patchwork looking almost, though, with two glassy white eyes. Then it wasn't just kissing him, it was biting into his tongue, biting into his teeth. He felt the thing's teeth break into the enamel of his own, and he struggled hard, tried to scream, but soon he went limp from the pain. Sandy drove to the manor late at night, around midnight. In her passenger seat was Elspeth's friend and editor, Gordon Gunn. Thank God she knew that they were friends. She messaged him on Facebook, logged into Elspeth's account, and he immediately volunteered to help. He really was a sweet boy, but he had a crush on Elspeth for years, and Sandy knew it. But she knew Gordon was at least a good guy, not like the other four, so she didn't mind. She liked that Elspeth attracted all the boys. It made her feel good. So, are you Elspeth's flatmate, he says? Here we go, Sandy thought. Sandy changed the subject immediately. How does he know where the manor is? Why isn't he there with them? Gordon says, well, he would be there with them, but Robert hates his guts. Says he messed up the last movie. He says he didn't, though, as he laughs. Sandy said, yeah, she knows, she saw it. Gordon says, but he didn't see her at the screening. Sandy laughs and says, yeah, she was in disguise in the back because Elspeth didn't let her go see it, but she wanted to go anyway. Ah, he says. They pull off near an off-ramp near the manor, and they see they have to drive down a dirt road to get there. They start on the dirt road, and then the tires spin. They're stuck in the mud. Great. So, are you and Elspeth together? Gordon asks as he tries to spin the tires. Sandy's heart sank. But she didn't see a reason not to tell the nice boy. She says, yes, they are. Gordon then looks defeated. He says, but they don't dress like... But then he stops. Sandy laughs and says, no, they don't all dress in dungaroos and stuff like that, like in the 70s, she laughs. But the tires are still not going. It was going to be a long night. It was midnight when the shower scene rolled around. Robert walked up to Elspeth and says, hey, you're doing a great job. Really great. beautiful, sexy. You're 10 times the actress Hannah was. Promise. Elspeth immediately sees through this. She says, drop the nice guy act. She's not getting her tits out. Robert stops and says, come on, we can't get the framing right otherwise, and the scene doesn't make sense without it. Plus, you owe us. Elspeth says, bloody hell she does. This is her body. Aiden says, well, he'd do it. Elspeth says, it's different. What? Laura says, all right, everybody out. She needs to talk to Elspeth girl to girl. Everybody leaves, and Laura comes up to her and says, hey, don't cry, Elspeth. As she sobs, she says she doesn't want to do it. Laura says, oh, sweetie, you have to. Elspeth looks up. What did she say? Laura says, Elspeth, you've always been the weakest link in this group. The least important part of the film, the set dresser. Everybody in university knows you're a fraud. What good have you done in the shoot other than flirt with the main actress? Elspeth cries. She says she didn't flirt with her. Laura says, okay, sorry, you've done nothing then. Laura says, they all know it. When you're not around, we all talk about it. You're useless. You undermine Robert at every turn, and you don't help with equipment or anything like that. Even Hannah left because she could spot a loser a mile away. This is all your fault, and we all know it. Laura gets close to her ear and whispers, just do the fucking scene. You have no one to blame but yourself. Do we understand each other? Elspeth swallows hard, her brain reeling in anger and confusion. Laura was supposed to be her friend, and then she does this whole horrible speech to her. Elspeth just nods her head as she cries. Good, Laura says. She leaves the room. This wasn't right, Elspeth thought. She can't do this. But her legs move on her own, guilt guiding her in the back of her mind as she does. Robert looks to her and says, okay, good, let's do it. Elspeth thinks to herself, she can't do this. Her body was for her and her partner's eyes only. Sound? Rolling. Camera? Rolling. Elspeth takes off her shirt. She thinks to herself, just imagine you're doing this for Sandy. Just imagine you're doing this for Sandy. She takes off her pants and turns away from them. Just from the back, Robert had promised her. Then out of nowhere, Robert calls, Jesus, Elspeth, cut! What the fuck? Robert calls out, really, Elspeth? Batman underwear? The whole crew erupts into laughter other than Robert, whose head was just in his hands, annoyed. He says, Elspeth, this scene is supposed to be erotic. How do you expect anyone to take you seriously with Batman underwear? Elspeth balls up her fists and says, you know what, Robert? I didn't exactly expect anyone to see my underwear today, you talentless fucking cunt. That shut everyone up for a second. She wanted to storm out, but 4 of them were blocking the door. Robert then takes a different tone. He says, listen, Els, I'm sorry. I just didn't expect a grown woman to wear that. He says, let's do it again. He's sorry. Elspeth says through tears, but what about Batman? Robert turns to Laura. He says, you two are about the same size. What kind of underwear are you wearing? Laura scoffs. She says she's not wearing any. Robert says bullshit. She never goes commando. Let me see, he says. Before that, he turns around to Deke and Aiden and says, turn around. That's my girl we're talking about here. Elspeth says, yeah, God forbid anyone see her naked, right? They turn around and Robert says, red lace. Good, that's perfect. Laura takes them off and throws them at Elspeth in the face. She looks at Robert, pissed off, and says, you know what? Fuck you, Robert. And she storms out of the room. Robert says, Laura, and runs after her. As he's chasing her, he says he needs to fucking smoke. Take 10. Fuck! He screams. Deke looks at Elspeth, and she looked back at him. She says, well, that went well. They both then laughed. Which, I don't know about you guys, but if I were Elspeth in this situation, I wouldn't be laughing. Laura bursted into the actor's room. Fuck Robert, she thought. He had humiliated her for the last time. It was okay when he humiliated Elspeth. She never liked her. But now her? His own girlfriend? Well, fuck him. Robert always had roaming eyes anyway. She never liked the way that he looked at other women. Even Elspeth on occasion. He had humiliated her in front of everyone. But he never really acted on it with other women. He never cheated. How many guys don't cheat, she thinks in her head. She was being overdramatic. She calmed herself down. She has to calm down even more before she goes back, though. But now she's in a dress sans underwear, which means she's going commando under her dress. But when I read this the first time, I thought this meant she was in sans underwear, like the Undertale character. I know that's a stupid misread, but it made me laugh thinking of Laura in sans underwear. She looked around for something to change into so she wouldn't be in a dress with no underwear, and she found Elspeth's jeans. It was only fair if she took them, she thought. Just then, she thought she heard something behind her, but she ignored it, not knowing she was being watched from the walls. Robert stormed down the stairs. They were turning against him. The whole production. A mutiny. Fuck, he needs a smoke. He tries the door and realizes it's locked. Oh shit, that's right. Laura has the key. He can't even take a smoke right now. But he has to go talk to Elspeth. She would walk if he didn't. He then saw someone at the end of the hall as he lit up a cigarette inside the house. Laura? He yelled out. He put the cigarette down and stomped on it under his boot and walked after her. In the walls, Aiden couldn't believe his luck. Elspeth and Laura both in one night? What luck? Then Laura took her dress off. Oh shit, he thought. That's the nicest pair he's ever seen. He wished he had more room in here, but beggars can't be choosers, he thinks. He takes out his cock and starts touching himself. He looks at Laura, thinking how he was looking at his classmate naked. Robert's girlfriend. That thought excited him. He pushes the thought of Robert out of his mind as he looks further at Laura, and then everything went to hell. Behind Laura, the door opened. She screams out, "She's changing! Leave!" But as she does, she hears someone behind her that sounds like Aiden screaming, "Laura!" When she turned around to look at the wall, a hand grabbed her shoulder, near her neck, under her collarbone. "What the fuck? Who is this?" she screamed. It wasn't Robert. Robert's hands were soft due to the fact that he's never done manual labor. These hands were rough, and the smell was worse than anything though. It smelled like blood, sex, and sweat. She swung an arm back at the thing and it meets it with a limb of its own. It was like hitting a brick wall and her bones snapped upon impact. "Laura!" Aiden screamed again. She couldn't respond though. The pain was too great from the bone jutting out of her arm. The thing takes her collarbone and grabs under it with a strange claw-like hand. It picks her up like a suitcase and the meat tears away from the collarbone as it does. It throws her against the wall. She was probably unconscious at this point, but the thing walks back up to her and grips the collarbone and rips it from the flesh. Its disgusting claw of hand digging into the meat of her shoulder. And then, it all goes dark for Laura. Deke and Elspeth talk as she picks up the red lace panties from the floor and throws them at Deke. She says, "Here, take a look at them. Look all you want." Deke says Robert told her to put them on, not him. Elspeth says, "Oh no, she's done." Deke says, "So what now? They're all gonna fail university because she's too shy?" Elspeth says it's not about being shy or prissy or a virgin or whatever. It's about showing Robert he can't treat people like he does. Deke says, "You're a cold bitch, you know that? Why aren't you gone already?" She says she wants to see Robert's face when she tells him. Back in the wall, Aiden had never been in a survival situation, he thought. His life had never been threatened before. The only time he had ever seen death was when he killed his girlfriend in a drunk driving accident. He never went to jail because his father was rich and got him off the hook, but he felt like the thought of her dead face was punishment enough. But this was something different. This thing in the room was huge. It was human, at least from what he could tell. He thought it was Ross Crawford, but he didn't think Ross was built like a brick shithouse and have such animalistic ferocity. Aiden leaned back away from the peephole. He felt like this wasn't like it was in the movies. Laura didn't scream for help or anything. She just gurgled and quietly pled. He remembered how he and Deke took hours to recreate the sound effects for the last movie. He saw the creature take a bone out of Laura and stick it into her with a disgusting small squish. It wasn't grandiose, but quiet. Disgusting. He felt a fear like no other. It wasn't like getting scared because of a movie or a video game. It was real. A primal fear. The thing then looked at the wall. He got face to face with the thing, but the shadow was still over his face. He couldn't tell what it looked like. The thing raised a metal fire poker into the peephole and shoved it through violently, but it barely misses Aiden's face as he slowly shimmers his way to the right, trying to dodge. The poker pushes through again and again and again, missing him narrowly every time, until it misses a little more each time he shimmers. After a few seconds, the poker was shoved through pretty far away from him. He lost me, he thought. Then the poker was shoved right into his stomach. Wet liquid dripped down his body, and he lost his breath. He remembered how his ex once told him that his dick was going to get him killed one day. Little did she know that that was literally true. The poker was removed and then shoved into his lower penis. It was pulled down hard and split it open like a banana. Then he heard loud knocking at the door. Not like it mattered. It got louder and louder, and then he realized that they weren't screaming at the door. He was screaming. The creature ripped the poker back out, and with it took the rest of Aiden's mangled penis. He died with nothing between his legs. Aiden and Elspeth were pounding at the door. They heard screaming like someone was getting murdered, screaming like they'd never heard. It sounded like a woman or a really high-pitched man. They knock on the door over and over until Robert runs up, hearing the commotion. He just looks at Deke and says, "Is it Laura?" Deke just nods and they try to break down the door. The only hope right now was that the lock was rusted or something. They smash into the door over and over with their shoulders until the lock falls with a metal clang on the other side. They go inside and look around and hope this was all a bad joke by them. Laura was nowhere to be seen, but a poker protruded from the wall, as well as a reddish-brown liquid spilling from all the holes. What had gone on in here? They walk inside and Elspeth slips in a puddle of liquid as well and falls on her ass. They would have laughed at her if the situation wasn't so dire. "Laura?" Robert says as Elspeth gets back to her feet. They checked the poker and the handle was slick with gore. They pulled her out of the wall and said, "Something's in there." Or someone. It was sticking out of someone. They had to check who it was. Elspeth took the poker and started breaking the wall down. She felt like she was breaking down firewood. She tried to look inside the hole she made, but she couldn't get a good look. She needed to break it some more. She hoped one of the guys would volunteer, but neither did. They just sat there, silent. But then she saw what was in there. "He's dead," Elspeth says. Robert vomits on the ground. He says, "Bullshit." Elspeth says, "The inside of that wall smells like blood and cum." "We need to call the police," Elspeth says. They all look at their phones. No signal. "We have to get out of here. Now," Elspeth says. Robert says, "We can't. Laura has the key. I locked the door because I thought you might run." As if this was somehow her fault. Dead or alive, Laura has the key. They need to find her. Elspeth says, "We can't. We have to leave the house now. Without Laura, they have to find another way. Whatever did that to Aiden is still here. The killer, monster, eldritch abomination, or whatever is still in the house." "Wait. Look," they said. A trail of blood is leading to the closet. They look around and see Laura's striped dress. Thank God. They look at it, but it has no pockets. "Where was the key?" "In there," Robert says, implying the closet. Robert says Elspeth opens it if she really wants to get out. So she does, and nothing. Nothing's in there. The trail of blood just ends. "How is that possible?" Robert asks. They get their phones out and shine a light in there. Still nothing. Elspeth pushes her hand hard against the back panel and it clicks. "Guys, you gotta come see this," she says, which is the most cliche line in any horror ever. Outside in the woods near the manor, Sandy and Gordon walk slowly through the trees. Gordon's jacket around Sandy's shoulders. Her teeth are chattering. Gordon says they have to be clothes. Sandy thinks maybe she misunderstood the text. Maybe Elspeth was just filming as normal, and this had all been a misunderstanding. They should go home. But as they walk further, their heart stops as headlights appear in the woods near them. Ross Crawford leans out and asks, "What are you guys doing out here?" "They're gonna catch a cold. You should get in my car." They do, and Sandy says, "Thank you so much. The heating was on and it felt so nice." "Where are you headed?" Ross asks. Though they don't know who this is. They say Crawford Manor. They have a friend there. Crawford laughs, says, "You won't find anyone there other than ghosts." Sandy says no, they have some friends there with a group doing an overnight shoot for a movie. Sandy asks maybe he's seen her friend, someone named Elspeth, about 5'8", brown hair, very pretty. "Elizabeth?" Crawford asks. "No, Elspeth," Sandy says. Crawford's eyes seem to glass over and he stares out the front windshield. "I used to know an Elizabeth once. Damn, did I ever know an Elizabeth. After all, she was my wife." "And you're right. The most beautiful woman you ever did see." He continues, but Sandy tries to interrupt, but to no avail. "We went on some dates. I courted her. Not like you youngins nowadays with going to bars and drugs and stuff like that. We went to the park a lot. A stolen kiss there, a hug here or there. We got married a couple years later. Then she died after that." Sandy tries to interrupt again. "I'm so sorry, sir, but if we..." He looked back at them and asked Gordon, "Come sit up near me." Sandy mouths, "Don't," to him, but this man was doing them a favor. She guessed she didn't mind if he reminisced about the old days for a bit as long as they got to their destination. Gordon gets out and goes up front. Crawford continues. "Not many visitors out here. Not since Elizabeth died. God rest her soul. Before, we got a few visitors. Even a pastor on account of Sebastian. He was a real out-of-sorts lad. A real eye for the ladies, though." "Hey boy, can you hand me that bag at your feet?" he asks Gordon. He does, and Sandy tries to get out now, but the door is locked, not liking where this is going. She says, "Sir, the The back door seems to be locked. Sandy asks if she can get out as Gordon gasps, "Sandy!" he says as Crawford pulls out a butcher's knife immediately and shoves it into his neck. Sandy tries even harder to pull open the door. She tries to use her elbow to break the glass. If only it had worked. Elspeth points a flashlight into the hidden room in the closet. "You think it's Ross?" Elspeth asked. But Robert says no, his car's not here. It's not him. Robert says if anything happened to Laura, he's gonna kill Elspeth. She says, "What? How is this her fault?" Elspeth says she'll show Robert exactly how it's his fault after it's all over. They continue down the long hallway to find another bedroom. A child's bedroom, as if frozen in time. Robert asks, "Is it safe in there?" Elspeth says, "Yeah, it looks like it." They hear a drip. Drip, drip, drip. Where's that coming from? They look up and like a bad horror movie, there's blood dripping from the attic entrance in the ceiling. A rope hung from it to extend the ladder. Robert says, "Ladies first." Whatever was up there was what they're looking for. Now he's a gentleman, Hall, Elspeth thinks. You can live like an asshole your entire life, but everyone will remember the good things you did. She thought of Laura and how she didn't deserve to die. Elspeth pulled the cord and a wooden ladder fell down, but no body. Robert says, "Elspeth, you go up there." But she says no, she's done getting pushed around by this asshole. He says, "Fine, Deke, you do it." He says, "No way, it's his girlfriend." Seems they had a stalemate. Rock, paper, scissors, Deke says. "It's not the best time, guys," Elspeth thinks. "Best 2 out of 3, Robert says. Elspeth sits down and waits impatiently as Deke wins the game. "Shit," Robert says. Deke apologizes. He knows he might have just doomed him. "Best 3 out of 5, Robert tries to coerce. As he does, a colossal noise comes from the attic and a pair of ugly hands break through the ceiling and grab Deke. It pulls him up into the ceiling and Elspeth grabs one of his legs and Robert grabs the other. They pull and pull. "Hang on, Deke!" they yell. For a second, it looked like Robert was going to run, but they both keep pulling. After a while of the tug-of-war, Robert says, "Fuck this!" and runs away. "Coward," Elspeth thinks. Deke is screaming the whole time, and Elspeth is losing her grip. The entire time, Deke is kicking and screaming, and then Deke's legs shoot up into the attic. Elspeth not strong enough to pull him back. Finally, Elspeth breaks down and cries. Deke got shoved through the ceiling and he couldn't see anything in the pitch black of the room. He found himself crying, saying he wants his mom. 2 meaty fingers enter his mouth and start pulling at his cheeks, ripping the flesh. He feels the blood enter his mouth as his cheeks get ripped open, the pain excruciating. He loses consciousness as he lays there dying from some other wound. But just before he dies, he thinks he hears chewing? Robert runs out of the closet and then out of the room itself. Poor Deke, he's dead. He knew it. It was useless. He wondered if Elspeth got sucked up there too. He couldn't take it. Everything felt like it was fake, an illusion, a prank. He ran down the stairs and rattled the front door handle as hard as he could over and over, but it wouldn't budge without the key. But out of nowhere, the door handle turns from the outside. Elspeth wanted to go up the ladder and help Deke, but the rational part of her brain knew he was already gone. Like Aiden, and probably Laura too. She wipes the tears and grabs her phone off the floor. "I will never finish the movie," she thought. She almost laughed at that thought in a time like this. She walked through the darkness crying as she got back to the entrance. She peered through the railing and saw Robert at the front door. The door opened from the outside as she saw him. Robert stood there as the door slams open. His last thoughts were, "For an old man, my uncle sure is fast." As a knife enters his lower jaw like an uppercut. Ross walks in, punches the wall with a meaty thump and asks, "Why? Why didn't you all leave when I said?" Ross just walked in. But people have been dying here for an hour now. Was he actually trying to protect them from what was in the house? If so, then why did he just kill Robert? Ross walks forward to a different room in the house, and the door starts to close. Elspeth knew this was her chance. She ran down the stairs and ran to the door. It was close now. 10 feet, 5 feet. And as she is within reach, a hand grabs her leg and she falls down. She lands right on her right shoulder and looks at who grabbed her. Robert, somehow still alive, his eyes glazed over. "Stop, Robert, please." She apologizes and gets his hands and snaps his fingers off her. The door where Ross went to opens again and she runs behind cover. And Ross enters the room yet again. He looks down at his dying nephew, disgusted. He stomps on his skull, crushing it and splintering his head, finally killing Robert. Ross looks up and says, "If anyone's left alive in here, know that I'm sorry. I never asked for this life. I am truly sorry. I wouldn't wish this life even on the devil himself. He then turns a little bit as if he was talking to someone else and says, "Who's gonna feed you now, huh? I'm done. I'm leaving." He then picks up Robert's body and goes to a different room in the house again, and the door is wide open. Elspeth thought to leave, but before she could run down the stairs to the door, he comes back. Then, without anything else, Ross shuts the door and leaves. Now, Elspeth was alone. Well, not quite. Ross Crawford had been a God-fearing man his entire life. He always wondered why his savior had cursed him with his life. He married and had kids, and made sure those kids were always fed and in bed by the time Elizabeth got home. Elizabeth, his wife, eventually lost her mind, though. One day, Ross had run home, realizing he was incredibly late, and when he got there, he saw her, his beloved Elizabeth, in the kitchen, being eaten by her 7 severely deformed children. He had enough. His life was over. The only thing he loved in the world was dead, killed by his own children. His life, that was held together with paper clips, fell apart. Ross called his brother then, a man without children at that point, and asked him to come over with a shotgun. He had to ask someone who did not have children. Only someone that did not know parental love could do what he needed him to do. Robert's father came over, and they hunted down each and every one of the disfigured children, shooting them all. All but one. Sebastian, the eldest. Ross couldn't bring himself to let his brother kill the last child he had. So, Robert's dad left, and he couldn't ever express his gratitude to him. He buried his 6 children and realized Sebastian held a child in his arms as he walked up to him. Ross was now a grandfather. I don't know why, but I believe it's implied that this child of Sebastian's was born of his own wife, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And the child was even more disfigured than Sebastian himself, without skin, veins exposed on the entire body. It wasn't possible, Ross thought. Although nothing could be done at that point. His life went on for 30 years. He performed the best duty any father could, and grandfather. He installed bars in the windows and tried to let them roam free after 8 p.m. in the manor, but they preferred the darkness, like vampires. They had exposed extra limbs, faces where they shouldn't be, eyes that fell out of their sockets, things like that. They liked to stay in the cellar with the insects. There came a point where Ross didn't want to let them suffer anymore. He never fed them as they would not eat. He had to do something for his children, though. So one thing led to another, and he realized that Sebastian did eat, but he ate people, human. And Sebastian liked to eat anyone, even children, but he preferred women. He had always been a real ladies' man. After all of this transpired with the film that night, Ross climbs into his Land Rover for the last time and takes a sip of whiskey. He looks back at the house and saw Elspeth on the window. Someone was alive in there after all. He smiled through tears and waves at her through the window. Ross then hits the gas on his Land Rover and drives off the cliff, ready for judgment from the god he fears. Just like that, another life was taken that night. Elspeth's only chance to get out, other than Laura as well. She banged on the window trying to get out, but it was no use. She looked around and tried to find a way to get to Laura. She had to do something. Out of nowhere, her nerves steeled and she ran towards the blackness of the hallway where Ross's office was, where he went. She followed a trail of blood like she was following the yellow brick road to Oz. She heard a noise above her in the attic. It was up there, whatever it was. She stood at his office door. What are you waiting for? She thought to herself. She slowly reached for the door and opened it. She walked into his office and the light was already on. Or did she turn it on? She can't remember, her heart is beating so fast and she's so scared. She looks around the office and there was a bookshelf with normal books and a few children's books. Inside the office there was another door, a huge metal one. A freezer. That must be where he stores the bodies. Elspeth didn't want to go in there, but she had no choice. She slowly entered and looked down. 5 black body bags on the floor. One had Ted. She was disgusted. His face was pretty much gone, his teeth crushed. The second body bag had Robert, her old friend. He grabbed his body and looked through his pockets. A picture of him and Laura at a fun fair, but no key and no cell phone. However, the keys to his van was on him, so she took them if she ever escaped. But those 2 were gone. And as she's looking, a huge thud from behind her. And then she saw it. It then gives a picture, which is weird because this book is the only book by Sodegren that has a few pictures in it, and it shows what Sebastian's silhouette looks like, and it looks like Wild from Berserk. He steps into the freezer, and his steps sounds like lead as they hit the ground. His body is massive, with patches of molted hair all over his body. His face half drooped, with a permanent sneer on his face. I imagine he looks a lot like the hillbilly from Dead by Daylight, as you can see on your screen. So if you need a visual, that's how I imagine Sebastian looked like. Elspeth waited there, held her breath, and closed her eyes. Waited for Sebastian to tear her limb from limb. But instead, the man got on his knees and started eating one of the bodies. Did he not see her? He was just transfixed on the body he was eating. He can't see me? She thought. He's blind, the skin stretched over his eyes. She held her breath. Could he hear the heart beating out of her chest? He just continues to gnaw on someone's body. It's Gordon, her only friend left in the world other than Sandy. Why was Gordon here? He would have stood up for her. Sebastian quickly stood up before she could lament on Gordon anymore. Did he hear her? Sebastian sniffs and comes face to face with her, his milky white eyes that are slightly exposed staring right at her. He licks his lips with a sandpaper tongue. He shoves his head closer, narrowly missing her. She thought quick, and as she got down, she started for the door, quietly. Laura had to have the key. That's her only way out. She got out without alerting Sebastian and headed for the actor's room. She could only hope that Gordon was more of a meal and not a snack. Why was he even here? Did Robert call him? He must have been really desperate to call his archenemy. Elspeth goes to the actor's room and then through the closet into the child's room, and then it hits her. This child's room must be Sebastian's. It was a child's room after all, and it looks like it was frozen in time. She pulled the cord up to the attic, and she almost went up the wooden ladder when a hand grabs from out under the child's bed and trips her. Elliot was awake, and Elliot wanted to play. Elspeth stumbled backwards, and Elliot, one of Sebastian's sons, ran out from under the bed. His face looked like melted clay. One of his eyeballs, a glassy marble, falls out of his head, and he grabs it with his mouth and puts it back in its socket, Naruto style. To keep with the Dead by Daylight theme, I imagine this thing, Elliot here, to look like Victor from the game, if you need a visual. Elliot looks around and sees Laura's body. He must think that's what he grabbed. He grabs at Laura again, and then the little mutant grabs his own penis and shoves it between Laura's legs. Elspeth tries to suppress a scream. The little thing ruts and goes faster and faster, having sex with Laura's poor corpse. The key sparkled on her body. After the little mutant finishes with that, he reaches for her chest. Did he know what a key was? Instead, though, Elliot grabs her breast, and with its untrimmed nails, digs into her skin and rips the flesh away, tearing her entire breast off. A souvenir. Elliot finished and then slumps over his prize, her body, and falls asleep. A stray hair from him pricked Elspeth, and it felt like wire. She slowly grabs over Laura's body as Elliot begins to snore, and she grabs the key and runs. But Elliot is not far behind because of the commotion. He grabs Elspeth's hair on her scalp and almost scalps her as Elspeth finds a spare bone from the pile in the room and whacks Elliot with it. No avail. He keeps tearing at her. The bone broke upon impact of his little barrel body. She took the shard of bone and rams it into his face. The little thing recoils and she ran, faster than she had ever run before. She goes down the stairs under the entrance, and Elliot was close behind as she opens the lock, slips through, puts her full weight on the door, and locks it shut. Elliot slamming his little body into the door as she finally escapes. The pounding would do him no good. Elspeth cries out in triumph, "I beat you, motherfucker! I won!" Nothing else mattered now. She had escaped the manor. Maybe not unharmed, but escape she did. She walked down off the stoop, past everything. She thought of how many died here tonight. Aiden, Laura, Hannah, Ted, Robert, Gordon, and Deke, and Mr. Crawford too. That was 8. And poor Gordon. Why did he come here? Did Robert call him? It was all Robert's fault after all. If he didn't have to film here, or come back here, or lock the door, at least 3 of them could have lived. Elspeth goes into Robert's van, crying to herself that she better get an A for this. She had to use humor, otherwise she'd fall apart. She just wanted to go home now. To Sandy. She would get under the covers and deal with all of this in the morning. But no, first she had to call the police at least. Bring a SWAT team. And 100 body bags at least. She drove down the dirt path and saw Gordon's car. She looks inside and sees an Oreo bar on the dashboard. Man, would she want that right about now. Sandy always loved those too. But no. Sandy couldn't have. Right? She gets out of the van and looks in the car, and her heart sinks. A green duffel bag. Sandy's green duffel bag. Elspeth's entire world collapsed around her. The only person she had left in this world came with Gordon to save her. Damn it! The only person she had left was in that manor. Probably dead at that. Sandy awoke a little while later with a massive headache. Where was she? She couldn't see anything. Was she in her own coffin? No. The material above her was plastic or something. What happened? The last thing she remembered was the man stabbing Gordon, and then him climbing into the back seat. Gordon's gurgles were the last thing she heard. She tears her hand upwards and rips open the bag and sits up. Is this hell? She wondered. Blood was sprayed all over the walls, bodies strewn about with loose pieces of meat and bone on the floor. Next to her, Gordon's body lay. Or at least what was left of it. She knew by the shirt he was wearing. She got up with a splitting headache and realized wherever she was, this room wasn't safe. She got up and opened the meat locker door seamlessly. Too easily. She looked back at the other body bags. She ripped them open. What if these were Elspeth? After she looked through them all, they weren't. None of them were. They were a bunch of people she didn't recognize, along with Gordon and Robert. One of them was a hitchhiker, she thinks. She walked out the room and looked for an exit. She found an open room and went in. Dolls lined the shelves on the wall, and a little girl was in there, humming. Had this little girl been kidnapped too? Sandy walked over to her and put her hand on the girl's shoulder, saying, "Come on, we gotta go before they realize we're gone." When the girl turned around, Sandy did scream. She had to. A skinless, tiny woman looked back at her. Her veins crocheted across her face like spider webs. She turned around again, only to be knocked over by a huge figure. Elspeth gritted her teeth as she slammed on the accelerator. A thought in her mind said, there's no point going back, she's dead already. No chance she's alive. She screams no in her mind as she takes a hairpin turn and drops the van into a ditch as an airbag deploys, crashing it. She curses herself. She shakenly gets out and opens up the back of the van. She looked around a bunch of junk and camera equipment until she finds it. The shotgun prop Robert had brought. She looked inside, and sure enough, there were 2 shells. Robert had lied. It had been loaded. He probably didn't even check. But for once, his negligence may have saved some people. She only had shot a shotgun once before in her life, when she tried to shoot clay pigeons on a farm, but she missed every single shot. She couldn't miss these 2, though. It was all she had. Elspeth went up the stoop once more and entered the manor one more time. She took the shotgun out and aimed down the sights. She tried to calm herself down. It was just like House of the Dead. She's got this. She slowly made her way to the office, following bloody footprints. Were they Sandy's? She knew everything about Sandy, her favorite food, her favorite TV show, her worst fears, but in fact, she did not know what her footprints looked like. So she just followed them. They're better than nothing, and they weren't there before. She goes inside the freezer again and sees Gordon's body, or what's left of it. Poor guy, she thinks. Another bag had a hitchhiker with her throat slit in it, and a body bag that wasn't cut open before was cut open. She might be in here, she thought, but she didn't want to get her hopes up entirely. But a loud noise startles her. It sounded like music? It was Once Upon a Dream, a Disney song. Why did she hear that right now? Had she gone mad? She followed the music until she found a door cracked open. She looked inside and saw nothing but dolls. She heard rapidly approaching footsteps just then. Elspeth turns around to see a little woman in a wedding dress, veins strewn across her face like spiderwebs. She had a little scimitar or knife or something and began to slice and stab at Elspeth while screaming. She knocks Elspeth down and screams in her face and slashes at her over and over, slashing her hands, slashing her chest, and her cheeks. Elspeth quickly uses one of her hands and grabs the veins in the woman's face and rips them apart. The little woman recoils in pain, screaming bloody murder, and runs away crying. Elspeth got up, grabbed the shotgun, and gave chase. She chased the little woman up the stairs until she saw that little girl almost get away into the fireplace in Elliot's room. She had cornered her. But Elliot ran out from under the bed as soon as she walked in there, his bad leg dragging behind him. He latches onto her leg and knocks Elspeth down. The little girl in the wedding dress started slashing at her again, this time angrily, getting chunks out of her legs and stomach. Elspeth quickly rips her leg away, and with the momentum, she grabs Harriet and lifts her up effortlessly. She was just a little girl. Could she actually be held accountable for how violent she is, growing up like this? Elspeth wondered. But she didn't care at that point. She took the little girl and threw her against the wall into the air, and she lands in the fireplace. And I want to take a sidebar here. I have no idea why this next part happens. I read around the text a bunch, and I could not find out what chain reaction happens in this moment for this next thing to happen. So, just so you know, this next thing that happens, I have zero clue why it happens. Going back to it, Elspeth throws the little girl into the air and she lands in the fireplace, and then she just erupts into flames. Maybe she hit like an igniter or something, or like hit a button, I don't know. I really have no idea. Elspeth then picks up the shotgun and points it right at Elliot's face and pulls the trigger. The little bits and pieces of the little guy's face exploding out from the shell. It tears his little face apart. Elspeth collects herself, runs out of the room, and follows the music yet again, not realizing the fire had started in the fireplace. She followed the bloody footprints once again and the music. The little girl in the wedding dress flails around as she tries to get up, all while on fire by the way, and trips on the floor and grabs the curtains, igniting them in that room as well. Elspeth kept running towards the music and bloody footprints. She wonders if the other shotgun blast could even take down Sebastian. He was too big, but Sebastian would probably find her soon enough. There's no way he didn't hear that shotgun blast with his heightened hearing. And she only had one shell left too. On top of it all, her arms and stomach were all sliced up. One hand messed up so bad to where she could hardly hold the shotgun correctly. Elspeth looked around in all the rooms and thought about how she was warm now. She didn't realize that a fire had been started on the ground floor. All that was going through her head was that she had to find Sandy. If she failed here, she would have to live the rest of her life knowing that she couldn't save Sandy. Sandy, the one who could hardly watch horror movies, was now in this situation. Ironic. She had to hope that the singular shell could take down Sebastian. He was the only one left. Elspeth ran up to the room where Aiden's body was, and for the first time, she wondered how he even got in that wall. She opened up the door and could have never expected what she saw. A gramophone playing that music, and Sebastian holding someone against the wall. It was Sandy. Elspeth grabbed the shotgun and raised it, but if she shot now, it would hit Sandy with the blast too. If she was too far away or too close, it wouldn't work. If she could just get Sandy to move her head just a little bit to the right without Sebastian noticing her, she could shoot and get a clean shot on him. Elspeth silently moved closer behind him, and was about to quickly call out to Sandy when she saw her. Sandy's face was stained with blood. Her eyes had been reduced to nothing but a mush of red, crushed grapes in their sockets. It was a miracle she was still alive, but she was. She was moving, trying to get away from Sebastian. She was trying to wiggle free of his grasp. Elspeth couldn't contain herself with the ghastly sight of her partner, and lets out a whimper saying, "No, you bastard." Sebastian heard her quiet taunt, whipped around and threw Sandy right at her, crashing her broken body into Elspeth's sliced up body. "Sandy?" she screamed. "Elspeth?" she replied, somehow still alive. Sebastian grabs Elspeth and pins her to the ground. Elspeth calls out to Sandy, "Get the gun quick!" Sandy cries out, "She can't see anything. He took her eyes." Elspeth is getting choked out by the monster, but she manages to choke out, "Please, Sandy." Sandy picks up a gun on the ground and says, "I love you, Elspeth, but you have to tell me where to shoot." Elspeth can't speak at all now, though. She's passing out as Sebastian chokes her harder and harder. Then she remembers everything that's happened. "Sebastian, please," she chokes out. Sebastian lets up slightly. "Elizabeth?" he calls out in a strange voice. Sandy says, "I love you." Sebastian cries out, "Elizabeth? I love you too." And then Sandy pulls the trigger. Sebastian got blasted backwards, half of his face getting blown off as he tumbled down, his full weight lifting off Elspeth. She got up and hugged Sandy, who was asking, "Did I get him?" Elspeth said yes, and looked at her and ran her hands through her hair. It was worse than she thought. Her eyes were completely clawed out. Patches of her skin were missing from her face, as well as parts of her body she would never be able to see again. But during their celebrating, she smelled something. Burning? Was it coming from Sebastian's less than face? No. It smelled like smoke. Something was on fire. She could smell the noxious fumes from below. It was on the ground floor and rising. She quickly told Sandy that they had to go. The car out front was their only hope, and it was right out the front door. As they ran towards the direction of the entrance, the entire bottom floor was already on fire, blocking their only exit. Elspeth knew the fumes could kill them both before the fire even touched them, so she told Sandy to get close to the ground and crawl. Sandy suggests maybe they can jump out the windows, but Elspeth says no, they're barred to keep those guys in. They run into the actor's room and close the door. How long did they have? Minutes? Seconds? They tore pieces of fabric from some of the clothes and covered their mouths and nose. Sandy asks, is there a back door? Elspeth says no, they're backed up to a cliff. The smoke was rising now. They had to think of something. But that's it. The smoke was rising. The fireplace had to have a chimney from earlier. Elspeth grabs Sandy's arm as she asks, where are we going? They were headed to Sebastian's room with the fireplace. They squeeze into the small space and Elspeth looks up. There were cobblestone footholds all the way up. They can make it. Elspeth grabs Sandy and says she has to climb. But Sandy says she can't see anything. How's she gonna climb? Elspeth says, well, you better figure it out. Otherwise, we both die. So Sandy gets to climbing. Further and further. Only about another 15 feet left. Elspeth then stares way up at Sandy, saying she's doing great, she's almost there. Sandy calls out, she can feel the breeze, she's close to the top. Behind them, rang out again, Elizabeth? How the fuck? How was he alive? His face was half missing. Sandy, hurry up, Elspeth calls out as Sebastian grabs her leg as she starts to climb, and climbs up after her. Elspeth shakes him off her leg and climbs even faster than she knows she could, the flames licking at their feet as they both climb now. Closely followed by Sebastian. Elizabeth? Mine. She climbs further and further, almost there. Sandy must already be out when Sebastian grabs her leg again. She kicks him as hard as she can, but she can't get him off now. Elizabeth? She finally turns, grabs a loose brick and says, my name is Elspeth, as she brings it down on his head over and over, the fire almost upon both of them now. She finally sees the wound from the shotgun blast and slams the brick into it. He stumbles for a second and falls. As he falls, he just says, Mama? And he falls into the fiery pit. Suddenly, something grabs Elspeth's hair. Sandy lifts her up by her hair and brings her to the top of the roof. They had escaped Sebastian finally. Did we make it? Sandy called out. Yeah, we did, Elspeth said. Sandy says, how do we get out of this situation now? Elspeth looks around and says she doesn't know, as she coughs up a bunch of black phlegm. All she can see is smoke and a beautiful sunrise on the roof. As she coughs up the phlegm again, a part of the house collapses, making sure no way down was possible. Sandy says, what about the back of the house? Could they scale down that? Elspeth says, no. It's a sheer 100-foot drop, maybe 2, into crag-infested waters. Sandy laughs a little. You were never good with heights, she said. Elspeth just says, yeah. Maybe the fire brigade will come. They sat in silence for a few seconds. Sandy asks, what's the sunrise look like as they embrace? Elspeth says, it's beautiful. Like a golden ring rising above the horizon on Christmas morning. Sandy says, I can imagine it. They sit in silence for a few seconds when Sandy finally asks, are we gonna die? Elspeth just looks at the sunrise and says, yeah, we're gonna die. Sandy says she wished she could see out of her eyes just one more second to see Elspeth smile. Elspeth laughs and says, there's not much to smile about. But just then she thought about Robert's last film. Tonight, Robert burns in hell. She laughs a little to herself. Sandy then asks the question, Elspeth, will you marry me? Elspeth cries. Of course, she said. Of course she would. Sandy says she wished she brought the ring, but it's home in her sock drawer. They laugh. Sandy says one more time that Elspeth is perfect and she loves her. Elspeth responds that she loves her too. They sit in each arms for a few more seconds before Sandy says, "Hey, if we stay here, we're gonna die, right? And if we jump, we're probably gonna die, right? Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" she says, willing to go out on her own terms. Elspeth just replies that it's a long way down, and there's rocks. Hard to avoid them all. But yeah, let's do it. Sandy asks, what if one of them lives and the other dies? Elspeth says, that's not gonna happen. Okay, Sandy says. They both get up and look over the precipice. Elspeth says, on three, okay? As the sun's golden halo turns to orange, the whole world was burning down before them. Sandy tells her not to let go as they fall, and Elspeth says she wouldn't dream of it. 1. Fire bursted through the roof, burning their feet. 2. The chimney crumbled behind them. 3. Elspeth took one last look at Sandy as they both walked off the roof, not looking down. As Elspeth fell, she smiled, for she had no fear. Only love. So that's it. That's the entirety of Night Shoot. I like Maggie's grave and especially the Haar more, but like Maggie's grave before this one has been growing on me a bit as I write the script. Like I said in the intro, I'm not sure that there's an extreme level of message or themes to be taken away from this book, as I feel like this one is almost just a story. But even from stories not meant to necessarily have themes, ones can still be observed. So let's get into those right now. But I apologize if this analysis is a little shorter than usual, but I'm sure you guys can tell me the themes you picked up in the comments if I didn't say them here. The first theme I can think of is exploitation of power. Robert shows how people in positions of power, especially in creative fields, tend to exploit those under them, or even more so, people willing to do anything for their dreams to get into the industry. Perhaps not as intense as the book or in the movies, but in subtle ways it does happen. Another would be how pride can both destroy you or save you depending on the situation. Elspeth's pride is destroyed by Laura and Robert throughout the whole book. They spend the entire time breaking it down. And then afterwards, Elspeth tries to save face or help others, and she in turn ends up dying herself. And although it's not her fault, and I'm not trying to victim blame here, the smart move would be to say fuck those guys. Elspeth was worth way more than they portrayed her. Which leads us into the next theme. Peer pressure, and how it can dehumanize people as well as others. Sometimes in friend groups, the bullying isn't even noticed, or even it's normalized to a point that people can get really hurt, or in this case, killed by a mutant family. It is once again not Elspeth's fault, but because that behavior was made normal in their friend group or project group or whatever it's called, it took its toll and destroyed them all. No one saw anything wrong with being mean to Elspeth, and that got them all killed in the end. And finally, let's all say it together, the final theme that always comes up on this channel somehow, and in every single piece of media we cover, the cycle of abuse. Old problems pushed under the rug can perpetuate problems further down the line, especially generationally. In the beginning, Ross Crawford was absolutely the victim. His wife died to his own children, with no fault of his own other than not dealing with the problem beforehand, getting them help or whatever. Then years of stirring on his mistakes, pain, and depression, he perpetuates it and ruins a friend group and another family, that being Sandy and Elspeth, and eventually he takes his own life. But that is about it. I want to hear what you think the message or themes of this book are, because this one was hard for me to nail down. If you disagree, I'd love to hear your take as well. I really do read all the comments, even the mean ones. Each and every one of you is a hero to me though, because you help make my dreams come true, and I love you all. Make sure to stay tuned for the next week's Disturbing Game Review, as well as more Extreme Book Club videos in the coming weeks. I think the next one is going to be I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, a very popular book. And to build off of popular books, I think at Halloween we're going to have a special where I read Dracula, because it is like one of my favorite books ever. But we'll see when we get closer. But until then, I love you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.